As we do on every Training Camp Live, brought to you by Community America, we also look at our position breakdown, and it's a presentation of DirecTV. We want to say thank you to all of the healthcare personnel and what they've done over the last 5 months with the COVID pandemic, because they do the work many times you don't see. The reason I say that is this position group, other than the offensive line, is probably the least appreciated in the game of football. It's the defensive tackles, the guys that grind inside to help this football team. And it's a group that made a meteoric rise last year in this defense that ended up being, as you had said, one of the best in the NFL in the last half of the season.
And you're totally right. You look at this group, they're not glamorous. You don't get a lot of stats as a defensive tackle. And I love stats. There's just not a lot of them on them. They're not, they're pass rushers, but they're not always getting those numbers. They're filling up lanes. They're stopping the run. But in the end, these guys are integral to your football team. And you're right. How we saw this defense get better toward the end of the year last year, really from week 11 on, these defensive tackles were a big reason why.
Yeah, there's some exceptions to that. Of course, Aaron Donald of the Rams is the valedictorian. He'll just wreck a whole game and get stats. Another guy is Chris Jones, and he's the first guy we want to look at in this position group. Chris is missing. Coach told you he's missed the last several practices with a groin injury, but he's expected to be back, not expected to be serious. But when you look at Chris and his marks, Pro Football Focus had him graded out as a 77, a pass rush of 90, which is terrific. But you have to look no further than Super Bowl 54. The last 11 snaps of San Francisco, he himself directly altered 3 of those 11 snaps.
Absolutely. And what can you say about Chris Jones? Just like you said, one of the best defensive tackles and just defensive players in general in all of football. Gotten better every single year. Since entering the NFL, only Donald and Fletcher Cox have more total pressures than Chris Jones at defensive tackle. And regardless of position, over the last 2 years where he's really blossomed, 5th in quarterback hits, 6th in sacks, and 7th in tackles for loss. And Mitch, as you said, in the postseason, he was Pro Football Focus's 3rd best postseason pass rusher of the decade. Behind only Von Miller and James Harrison, 2 pretty good ones. So he can play defensive tackle. He can play defensive end. He can play quarterback, I think, if they wanted him to. He can do anything for this team. He's an absolute beast, and I'm so glad he's back in a Chiefs uniform this year.
We get caught up in sacks, but if he goes back to that 18 year where he had to set an NFL record with 11 straight weeks with a sack, that'd be nice. But there's more than sacks for Chris Jones's game. All right, the next group of this DT group would be Derek Knott. Now, Derek was back today and limited. Coach told you that as well. He's been battling with an ankle injury, but I thought Derek Knott took big steps last year. When you look at what he did, 698 snaps during the season, he also had some big plays. Let me give you another one in Super Bowl 54. Mostert gets a gain of 5 on the 48-second 3-and-out after the Chiefs get within 4. That play could go for 25. Would it not for Derek Knott making a play? Derek Knott helps this team win.
Absolutely. He's really grown over the last 2 years into one of the better young run stuffers in the NFL. And you mentioned all those snaps last year. I think, one of the best abilities, especially in the NFL and particularly at defensive tackle, is availability. And 27 starts for Derek Knott over the last 2 seasons, all 16 games last year. Just one of the strongest guys on this team. Tree trunks for legs out there. And like I said, just really growing into a really good run defender, solid player. And I look for him, maybe any young player, to develop some more consistency in his game as he's going forward. But really good player, looking for him to take that next step to maybe a great player this season.
Our next player in our position breakdown, brought to you by DirecTV, the defensive tackle, a guy that maybe flipped the season last year for the Chiefs and did it in subtle ways. Again, doing the dirty work in the defensive tackle position, Mike Pennell. About mid-October is when they picked him up. And Mike Pennell, in those last 6 games, was terrific, and in the playoffs, just plug in the middle.
And you have to talk about Brett Veach with this, because when you have a need at defensive tackle in the middle of the season, it's not easy to find a guy that can come in and fill a hole for you. And Brett Veach did that and more. Finds Mike Pennell. He is a diamond in the rough for this team. Like you said, came on in late October and plays in all but one game the rest of the year. Incredible stuff. And from week 8 through the end of the regular season, he was the 16th best run defender among defensive tackles according to Pro Football Focus. And you find that guy on the street? That's unbelievable to find Mike Pennell in this group. He just really improved the run defense on the stretch as this team got better. And also just a great locker room guy. When you see Mike Pennell, you just have to smile. This was kind of a tough stretch for this team, facing some adversity. And I think having him both on the field as a run stuffer and in the locker room just as a great all-around glue guy for this team was really big.
Pennell 7-1 when he played for the Chiefs last year. And the one game that he missed that you talked about, he was a coach's decision inactive, and the Chiefs lost to the Tennessee Titans. In that last time the Chiefs lost, that was on November the 10th. Next is one of our two St. Louisans in this group, and it's Collin Saunders. Collin is getting a ton of reps out here. We always talk about we're going to get to that in a second when we do our 5 observations. We always look at our upgrades and opportunities, but Collin's getting exactly that with the injury to Chris Jones.
And that's exciting. We saw him flash a lot last season. We kind of saw, people called him the Aaron Donald of the FCS before he came to the Chiefs. You kind of saw a little bit of that last year. The jump from Western Illinois to the NFL is a big one. That's hard. And we saw early in the season he was inactive for several games because he's still trying to learn what the NFL is all about. But when Chris Jones got hurt last season, all of a sudden he jumps in, and we saw that he could hold his own. He looked good out there. 54 snaps against the Houston Texans early in the year and looked the part. And then great hustle against the Green Bay Packers, sacking Aaron Rodgers. Pretty good first sack for him, getting Aaron Rodgers. So looked good. He was primarily a rotational guy, once Chris came back, but still the reps that he got, he looked good out there. And like you said, after a full year in the system now, you can come here with a foundation of last year, trying to build on that. And while we want Chris Jones back as soon as possible, the fact that he's getting these reps right now with the ones, it's only going to help his development moving forward.
Yeah, the numbers at this position are always interesting. Usually 4 kept on the 53-man roster, but you always want to keep the other guys around because depth at this position is paramount. We saw it last year. And the next 3 we're going to lump together. We got another St. Louisan in here. In fact, Tershawn Wharton is in this group. If you're a fan of Missouri S&T, right, in Rolla, Missouri, he's trying to become the 3rd S&T player, the old Missouri Mines. Great school, by the way, if you're into engineering and metallurgy. But this group, these 3 guys, Devereaux Lawrence, Braxton Hoyt, and Tershawn Wharton, the other 3 in the room, you want to keep depth at this spot because you never know, because of injuries there, who you need to plug and play well into the season.
And Devereaux Lawrence is a guy with some experience at depth there. On the Chiefs practice squad for the latter half of the year last year, but he played 11 games for the Cleveland Browns and over 200 snaps. So he has some experience. He did some things, some solid outings. So, I like Devereaux Lawrence there. And Braxton Hoyt, a fellow Mississippi State Bulldog for Chris Jones on this defensive line. Another UDFA from last year that stuck around on the practice squad and knows the system a bit. So the Chiefs will see what they have in him in this camp. And Tershawn Wharton, just a man among boys at Missouri S&T. 58 tackles for loss, 35.5 sacks, and 11 forced fumbles during his career there. He's a project right now from a small school, but he athletically looks the part.
Again, one of 2 St. Louisans in this 7-man defensive tackle room, a huge key to the season. And we're going to get into this group a little bit more in the 5 observations because let me tell you where it gets real important when you look at the first 4 games of the Chiefs' schedule. These guys are right at the crosshairs of what will take to be successful in those games.